Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am going to be doing a review of The Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold. You're probably wondering why I'm sat in this room. You're probably wondering why I'm sat on the floor. If you watched my previous video, you'll know that I am leaving London. So I'm moving out of my flat, I'm packing things up. You can actually see some of my boxes there, and there's quite a lot of noise in that room because there's this festival going on where I live at the moment, and so I thought I would come into my bedroom. I'm sat on the floor because I don't actually have a chair in this room, and you know what, it's always good to feel grounded, so let's get started. The Curse of Chalion, I have to say, has probably got to be one of the best books that I have read this year. It's kind of classical medieval fantasy, and my gosh, is Bujold a master in character work and building these like incredibly vivid political medieval worlds. And oh, this book was just amazing. I purposefully started to read the book a little bit slower because I didn't want it to end. That's how much I loved it. That hasn't happened to me for a while, where I've like purposefully tried to slow my reading down of the book because I don't want it to end. I was really sad when it was over, and I have to say the ending of that book was amazing too. So anyway, let's jump into the read. What did I like about it? I liked everything about it. I loved everything about it. The character work. We follow a character called Kazaril. Kaz is one of the best characters I've read in a while. He has got lots of depth, so many layers. He is your kind of typical beat up fantasy hero, but there are elements of him that make him a little bit morally grey. He starts off as this kind of very apathetic, he doesn't really care about life. He doesn't really know what to do. He doesn't really have anything to live for. As we progress throughout the book, this changes and his character grows and develops in ways that you don't really expect. And I loved it. I love male character types who are kind of like beat up, they're done with life, and they're the kind of like macho, warrior style kind of guy. The guy who always kind of takes control and takes the lead. But I love that type of character when they have depth, they have layers, they have emotional depth, and there is maybe a side to them that we don't typically see. It's why I love Logan, Nine Fingers from the First Law trilogy, and it's why I love Kaz from The Curse of Chalion. And if you're looking for some really interesting character growth, this is an older character than what we typically get in fantasy, especially kind of classic fantasy, I would say. I think with a lot of classic fantasy, you get a lot of younger protagonists, and then maybe we see them grow as the book develops or the series develops. But I think he's like in his mid-30s if I remember correctly, so he's already seen a lot of stuff. He's been through a lot of stuff, he's killed a lot of people, he's been in wars, he's seen betrayal, he's seen politics, he's seen it all before, and he's done with it. But then he gets kind of roped back into it, but he accepts it because he knows he's good at it, but he's also extremely caring of the people that he has around him. He cares for them, and he puts his not cowardice, because he's not a coward, but he puts his self-doubt and he puts his sense of apathy to the side to care for the people that he really cares about. And I loved it. I love Kaz. Wonderful character. I'm still thinking about him. I finished this book a couple of days back, and I just thought he was a wonderful character. And I love the ending of the book because I think it was extremely well deserved for him. The next thing that I really love the surrounding cast of characters. We follow some really amazing women in this book. There are two female characters that we particularly see through the perspective of Kaz, and that is Beatrice and Iselle. Iselle is the princess, and Beatrice is essentially like her maid, and there is just a wonderful kinship and friendship that he develops with these two characters that I just think is really beautiful. It's not, sexual or anything. Like, he cares about these people because they are people who unfortunately are in a situation, and he just wants to help them, and he wants to help the broader kind of family because he wants to support Iselle, as her character develops. And I just love the fact that this is a friendship based on a bunch of people liking each other for who they are. Kaz is a very decorated war hero, and so you would that does play a part maybe at the start, but then by the end of the book, they love him for who he is and what he does. It's just wonderful. And Iselle, she develops amazingly by the end of the book. I don't want to say more than that because I will spoil it. And Beatrice's relationship with Kaz was one of my favorites as well. And if you read the book, or if you have read the book, you will see why, and you will know why. The next thing that I loved was the plot. I think the plot starts off a little bit slow. We get a little bit of world building, we get a little bit of context of the broader kind of political sphere, and I really enjoyed it. There's a lot of politics in this book, not too much that's overwhelming. It is a standalone, and so there's not like tons of politics, but there's enough that keeps it interesting and engaging for the reader. And as somebody who loves political fantasy, I really appreciate it. I didn't actually expect that I was going to get this much politics, but I really enjoyed it. I actually think it was one of my favorite parts of the book, and it just develops in a way that makes sense. Like, it's just quite realistic, I think. The next thing that I really loved was the villains. I think the villains were really good. They're not your like mustache twirling villains at all. I hate that type of villain. But, you know, they're two guys who do some pretty messed up stuff. There's a bit of history there as well with Kaz, which I won't go into, but, you know, these characters know each other and there's familiarity, and so we are kind of seeing this for the first time as the reader, obviously, but then we're getting this context from Kaz and from some of the other characters as well. Oh, another character that I really loved was Pally. Pally's amazing. Great character. He's basically like Kaz's like right hand, and they have this really funny like banter between them. I just loved it. Anyway, going back onto the villains. So the villains are these two brothers, and they're essentially just trying to get more power. A simple kind of, you know, villain motivation. They do some pretty questionable stuff. You know, they set people up, they kill people, you know, classic villain stuff. But I think they have a little bit of an edge to them, which I appreciated. I don't think they're your kind of cheesy villains. Like, they have depth to them, and I like the fact that we have this history between Kaz and the villains as well, because it just makes, I don't know, it just makes it feel a little bit more real, and like there's, you know, we're learning the history as we're going along. The next thing that I really loved, and I'll maybe say this is my last thing because I don't want to just keep going on. I love how the pacing is done in this book. The pacing is spot on. We get that initial build up, but then there is this like little mystery that we get at the start of the book, and then it kind of, you know, really starts to pick up as Kaz goes to this one area in the world, and then it just really kind of ramps up. But then there's these like quiet moments. I've said this before, I really like quiet moments in books, you know, where characters are just talking around a fire and they're just talking about life, or they're just talking about what's happening. And there's quite a few moments like that, and I really loved it because it makes it much more character-centric. Like, I think this is a very character-centric book. Some people might say it's a very plot-centric book, which you could argue it is. But I like the fact that we get these little moments of just like quietness and just peace between these characters. It just made them a little bit more relatable to me. We got more insight into the nuances of each of their respective characters, which, as we all know, I really enjoy. I said that was going to be the last thing, but that was a lie. The last thing I'm going to mention is the magic. The magic in this book is quite unique, and it's also not like a huge part of the book. Like, I love a good magic system as much as the next person, but, you know, I also don't like tons of it sometimes, and I think the Curse of Chalion was a really good balance of the two. Like, we get a lot of like history and politics, but then there is this kind of magic part that comes into it really, I would say, from about chapter 8 or 9 onwards. That only really picks up about a third of the way in, which I really liked. And then the magic itself is, I don't want to say much about it because I will spoil something, I'm sure, but it's quite, is it unique? I don't know if it's unique, but it's just different to what I've been reading recently, and I just liked it for that reason. I don't think the magic is like some complicated magic system like, you know, maybe Brandon Sanderson has done in the past, but, you know, there's a curse, and the curse has ramifications, and they need to break that curse, and that's pretty much it. And I really liked the fact that it wasn't this like overly complicated system that we have to spend hundreds of pages learning about. So I really like that balance. And I think if you're maybe like a beginner into fantasy, this is a really good beginner adult fantasy book, because there are some darker parts to this book. I don't think it's appropriate for children, in my opinion, but there are like some darker bits to this book that I think could make it a good introduction for maybe like young adults transitioning into, you know, adult fantasy. And also definitely for adults. Like, just because I say that, don't let that put you off. Like, it's incredible. In terms of negatives, there are none. Obviously there are none. When I say it was one of the best books that I've read this year, I truly mean it. There was nothing bad about it. I was worried in the last like 20% of the book that there wasn't that much left and there was still quite a lot to be resolved. and I was really worried that it was going to be rushed, but it wasn't. And I really appreciate Bujold for somehow tying up all the loose ends in a way that made sense and doing it in a quick manner. And it was just perfection. It was perfection. Like, I didn't know I needed to read that book until I started to read it, and I just fell in love with her writing, I fell in love with her characters, and I fell in love with the way that the whole book was overall executed. So I clearly gave this book a 5 stars. If you haven't read it, what are you doing with your life? Go and pick it up. It is phenomenal, guys. I cannot believe there aren't that many people talking about this book. It is just wonderful. Like, if you are just looking for a good fantasy standalone, great characters, great plot work, all the bells and whistles, this is the book for you. And who doesn't want that? Everybody wants that. So just go and pick it up now. Go now. All right, I've done my sales pitch. Thanks for watching, guys. If you have read it, ping me down below. If you have any questions, also ping me down below, and we can take it to the comments. I'll see you in the next video, guys. Stay safe, take care. See you in the next one. Bye.